We went down there because they bought our big quantum flow unit, and which takes a couple of days to install. And when we went down there, they had also bought the whole house EMF technology. When we put it in their house and we turned it on, it was just like this subtle quietness where you couldn't really describe it. It must have been like what it was to be around without cell phones, which most of us forget.
I would have never experienced it. Yeah. I have no idea what that's like.
Yeah. It's just this light quietness. It feels to me like it's almost like you're in a forest and there's just this stillness, this quietness, just takes the edge off of things, and it just feels really great. So to be able to have these tools, these technologies, create coherence in your environment so that you can more clearly download, receive information, self-heal, be at a greater state of being and peace. I think there's tremendous value in that, experience.
So do you feel like, and this is really interesting, where there might be a catch-22 here of, okay, if I, get this EMF home harmonizer, let's say I even put it right beside me because there's a shit ton of EMF going off around me. But if I get it, I set it up, right? And then I'm able to feel this peace, this level of peace that you're describing, which I can imagine, but I can't really, feel it. If I find that inner peace, then because of this, this infinite being that I am, would I be able to reproduce that on a more, let's say grand scale where now I might not even need the harmonizer anymore? Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'll step back just for a minute before answering the full, question here. One thing that we have found on some rarer cases is that people are so used to that tapping and that noise that when they are in silence, it almost feels annoying or different. And so they judge that as, something's not right, because they're used to so much incoherence that it can feel like slightly annoying. It must be similar to like someone that's in New York City and is hearing honking and traffic all day long. They move out to the country where there's peace and they're like, oh, I can't do this. It's too much. But then after they're in the country for the while, they're like, I love this sense of peace, just feels so good. So there is that aspect that some people experience. Other people just say, I feel better knowing that I have this. Other people can tap in and they can feel the energies and the coherence and harmony. But to get to your question, yes, that's the absolute goal. When someone goes through our quantum flow unit, which I have a picture here just because it's sort of hard to describe it, but it looks like a giant bed, if you will, with two projectors. And and you're surrounded by nested geometries and light and music, not physical light that you can see, but we're taking the information from light and putting it into this environment.
And you sleep in this thing, right? It's like a bed with an X-ray thing above you, essentially, but not an X-ray.
Yeah, this one you're in for like 30 to 40 minute sessions.
Okay.
Yeah. And we're not actually projecting anything other than light, the information from light, music, and geometry into the environment. But some of it's going through a glass fiber to ensure that there's nothing else that's, flowing through electromagnetic frequencies or anything. It's just light, the information from light, music, and geometries. And we can even turn the music off if you don't want to hear it, but you're still getting the information, geometric inputs into that environment. But most people enjoy listening to music. But when you're in there, what happens is when you surround yourself in a very coherent, harmonious environment, you start to entrain with that and you start to jettison the baggage that we've all accumulated through the process of living. So yes, you are absolutely right. When you're in a coherent environment, and when you're around harmony, you will start to become that and start to jettison things that don't belong. And that's the goal. Like when people go out in nature, and you sit under a tree and you're not on your cell phone and you're barefoot, you just start to feel better. You start to connect with this coherent information field. Nature is a coherent information field.
It's reminding me of a picture that I've seen online a couple times where it's like, it might be 3 or 4 pictures in a row, but the first picture is of a guy and he's like super angry. And then the next picture kind of shows like a layer of his face is removed and under it is a face that's crying. And then in the next picture, that face layer is removed. And then you see a little boy kind of like curled up in a corner of like a wall. And the whole thing is like, we're all at some level just a kid. And the reason people get angry, the reason that you see all of this, let's say, hatred, is they were a kid at one point that never understood their ability to express their emotions. They were never shown love, maybe from their parents. They were in a place of fear or shame or guilt, and they're crying. They're literally crying on the inside. And their only way to express that is anger, because that's probably what they were taught from their parents. And so when you sit there and spread that love, you spread that, listen, like, it's all going to be okay energy, they have no choice to continue to be angry. Like, it's not, they're either going to leave because they don't know how to confront it, or they're going to, like you said, just emotionally break down. And, you know, it's going to heal you and them at the same time.
Obviously, I wish, nowadays that I had gotten an engineering degree and all that kind of stuff, but
doesn't sound like you need it.
Yeah, it could have hindered me in other ways. I started to realize, and my dad did as well, you start to work with higher dimensional physics, which is hard to explain in this world. So you're able to get results from things that would, in some cases, seem impossible and unlikely. And that's, how my dad created his company years ago, which ultimately ended up going bankrupt, pretty much, shut down because of some things in society where they weren't interested in creating new materials. The CEOs decided, let's focus on the shareholders' short-term profits.
Classic.
And let's get rid of new technologies in our cars and in the mining industry and so forth, because we're not going to be here, in a few years. We can make millions focusing on shareholders.
Yep.
Let's not focus on the company's growth. Let's just focus on ourselves. So that big mega trend that happened all over the world really affected them. They sold off parts of their company and stuff, but it was a trying and hard time for, my parents and my family, where we went from experiencing abundance to absolute losing almost everything. It was sort of a dark time, but it was also a blessing. The more we went down this path, we realized that the human mind, whatever you can perceive, it can be created. There can be reality if it's based in coherence and harmony. I don't know if we want to go down this path, but love is truly the only force that there is. I know everyone's like, oh gosh, well, there's the devil, there's hate. There is darkness to show us the contrast, and we need the darkness to show us the light. However, the darkness, the things that we would perceive as negative anyways, aren't always negative. For example, sometimes it's our human mind translating things a certain way. And then we realize later on, oh, that was actually a positive thing. I deemed it as negative. And sometimes, the negative is, just literally an opportunity, a report card for us to realize that, something else needs to transform or change in our lives. And so higher dimensional physics, sorry for taking so long to describe it, but higher dimensional physics is really activating protocols that aren't normally in this three-dimensional realm, but do have the ability to manifest and create phenomenon, in this realm. It's a beautiful thing,
Yeah, I've definitely done that myself with food, where it's like, say it's maybe meat, because I love meat, right? I'm a big meat guy. And so that's something where I started kind of thinking along the lines of, people are like, oh, well, if you're eating meat and the animal was scared, then you would take that into you as well. And I'm like, shit, there's probably some truth to that. Well, at the same time, I got some sort of download, but like what you're talking about, where it's like, wait, if someone put fear into it, love's a more powerful energy, I can transmute it.
Yeah.
And kind of at the same time, I had this same thought around grace. And it's like, wait, I've always seen it in a religious context, but just because it's religious doesn't mean that it doesn't hold value. And I kind of realized what you were saying. I was like, wait, why don't I take time to bless the whole process, the chicken that laid the egg, the farmer that picked that egg up, and literally mentally go through the entire process in my head, right? The farmer had to pick it up. The farmer then had to put it onto a truck of some sort. There was a truck driver that then took it, let's say, to, the local grocery shop, who then someone placed it on the shelf, and literally mentally rehearse the entire process that it would go through.
That's awesome.
And I kid you not, the food tasted better. I don't have, it's anecdotal, right? It's 100% anecdotal, but to me, that food actually tasted better every time I did that. I was more present with it, and it felt like there was this more energetic alignment with me and the food as I was eating it. And And something that also touches on this, because multiple times you were talking about how.
So words by themselves, if there's an agreed upon collective vibrational frequency to them, they have their own frequency. So where I'm getting with this is if you take 2 empty jars, same size, you cook some rice on your stove, and you dish out equal amount of rice into each jar. It has to be somewhat moist rice. Cap each one, write hate on one, love on another.
Mm-hmm.
Those frequencies of those words will actually start to affect the rice inside them. It's a neat experiment to do, and I did it a number of years ago. And so what's even more awesome is to take the jar of hate, and first ask the universe, is it okay if I express hate? Because hate's not something, I love to express at all. But for the experiment, you'll probably get, a yes. And so unscrew the jar lid and feel of something that makes you feel angry, and just breathe onto the rice, cap it, and then just relax for a minute, get into a better state of being.
Energy.
Yeah, clear the energy. Unscrew the one with love, and just picture love. Just gently breathe into it, or breathe into it the same way you did the hate one in terms of amount of breath, but this time in love, and cap it, and come back in 2 weeks. Keep them in similar areas in your house, number of feet apart, same windowsill, same amount of sun, or in a closet or whatever, and take them, unscrew the lids. And after a couple of weeks, what we noticed was the both fermented, but the one that fermented with hate was just really like sour and disgusting. And the one that was fermented with love smelled slightly sweet, and they had different colors to them as well. And then you come back in like a month and a half, open those up. You better open the hate one outside, because it is absolutely disgusting.
Well, to give you a level, another layer of this, you could do a glass jar. And so then you don't even need to open them to smell them. Like, you can see the actual rotting on the inside.
Yeah. But if you have it as like, oh my gosh, wow, like we have this connection, and like, let's explore. They've done studies, and I'm sure if you go on YouTube, you can find some of these. And I know Cleve Baxter, who wrote the book, The Secret Life of Plants, which is an amazing book on communicating with plants. And you think, well, how a plant has a thought, a plant. Yeah, they've done studies where they've taken someone that a really good relationship with their pet, their small little, dog or their cat. And the studies that I've seen were dog. And they have a camera on the individual and the dog. And they find that, like, if the owner is going to do a flight right at the point of takeoff, when there's more anxiety for the owner, the dog will feel anxious. And subsequently, when the individual is coming home, before you could audibly hear, even using a dog's ear, the car coming down the street or whatever, the dog, they'll have video cameras. The dog will get up and move in a different position in the house or by the door or whatever. Person opens the door, and it just looks like the dog may have just run in to say hello, but the dog had known ahead of time. So it's obviously tapping into this higher dimensional consciousness, which is accessible to us all. We see this so well and so beautifully in the animal kingdom. Like, when you see a flock of birds, they're all acting on one consciousness, right? It's not like one bird's like, okay, everyone turn left. What did you say? And the birds are running into each other, right? It would be chaos. But they've tapped into this one consciousness. Same thing with a school of fish. They just dance together, equal distances apart, right? I mean, they aren't like bumping each other, and someone's not, out of tune.
And they've even trained dogs to be able to tell whenever a kid's about to have a seizure, right? And then the dog is like, hey, yo, you're about to have a seizure. Like, let's get on the ground. And then they have a seizure like a couple seconds later. It's like, what the fuck? Like, they are tapped into this different layer of communication and consciousness, kind of like what you're talking about, which is absolutely fascinating. And my dog barks way too much, and I'm trying to like communicate on that level, but it's kind of difficult.